Deputy Joe Higgins, thank you. Without interruption, please, thank you. Deputy Higgins.
Good morning, Count Cole. Taoiseach, the day before yesterday, the Sunday Independent, and in case you didn't know, your Transport Minister Varadkar beside you will tell you that it's not a left-leaning or socialist news sheet. But the Sunday Independent, in a thorough survey, found that the 300 super richest people in this country between March last year and March this year, from an incredible €57 billion to €62 billion in round figures, an increase of €5 billion. Taoiseach, that year coincides exactly with the lifetime of your government. And in this impressive survey, I have to say, Nick Webb, the business editor, points out that the rich list total nearly matches our bailout. But he goes on to mention new yachts, magnificent palaces in the sun, stupendous artworks, football clubs, and concludes it was a good year for the super rich. Taoiseach, however, it was not a good year for people with disability in our society. You maintained the cuts in the pension for the blind, for example. You cut the fuel allowance for elderly people. You attacked the precarious economic situation of one-parent families. These people who are clinging for economic survival to the edge, along with the millions of ordinary people, workers, low and middle income, who are suffering from your austerity. Taoiseach, how do you justify refusing to impose a progressive taxation on this super wealth when the increase of €5 billion in 1 year dwarfs the €3.7 billion you are imposing in cuts this year to pay off bankers and bondholders, with devastating consequences for our society, tearing strips from the health service, compromising education, cuts which are causing enormous suffering?
Thank you, Deputy.
What moral argument is there? What economic argument? The United Left Alliance has estimated that 5 to 10 billion could be brought in taxes on the super wealth. This confirms it. Taoiseach, is it any wonder that decent, ordinary taxpayers are in revolt all over this country, with well over 1 million householders refusing to pay your household tax?
Thank you.
Can I ask you, since you can inflict cuts with no compunction at a week's notice, will you now bring in an emergency budget to provide for an emergency tax on wealth to alleviate the cuts and the tax burdens on ordinary people and make the super wealthy pay for a change?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I didn't see all the details of Deputy Ross's survey here on the paper. And I don't know whether he gave you the details or not as to who he's actually talking about here. But this is a difficult and challenging year for a great number of people, Deputy. I recall myself being a member of a local authority back in the 1970s, where everybody paid water, everybody paid rates in respect to services being provided. We got away from all of that in the intervening 30 years, and it's very difficult to have people understand the necessity of spreading the burden as equitably and as fairly as possible. Now, there are changes to the taxation system in respect of the budget. As you're aware, there were no reductions in the basic social protection rates, and the impact of government decisions, both in respect of the universal social charge and the minimum wage, was to protect those on the lower end of the scale and to take significant numbers out of the requirement to pay those levies. The Minister for the Environment has already made it clear that there are extensive waivers in respect of the household charges. I'd actually like to see, as one person who is reputedly quite wealthy in the country here said to me, that wealth was being returned from his account to Irish banks here. I think in a gesture of practical patriotism, there's an issue there in respect of confidence in our own country. So there have been changes brought about by the Minister for Finance in respect of the taxation of the higher paid in the country. There has been no reduction in the basic rates of social protection. And while this year is very challenging, people understand that the problem that we have in this country is not going to go away unless we deal with it. And the way we have to deal with it is for everybody to make a contribution. We hope that that contribution is fair and is equitable and is affordable by people. And where that doesn't apply, exemptions and waivers will help to get them through this particularly challenging period up ahead.
Deputy Higgins.
Taoiseach, I asked you, what's the argument, moral or economic, against the imposition of a levy on the super wealthy in our society in view of a very comprehensive survey, which wasn't done by Deputy Ross, incidentally, it was done by a series of editors and sub-editors and researchers. And in fact, to show how comprehensive it was, the business editor said some of the super rich even got in touch with us to make sure that nothing was left out in what we were reporting on them. Now,
could I have your supplementary?
Taoiseach, Warren...
The copy of The Independent is available in the library.
Warren Buffett, as you know, is one of the leading capitalists for decades. And he said this some time ago, and to put it in the Irish context. He said, while the poor and middle class fight for us in Afghanistan, and while most Americans struggle to make ends
Deputy,
meet,
would you please ask a
we
supplementary
mega-rich
question? Thank you.
continue to get our extraordinary tax breaks. My friends and I have been coddled long enough by a billionaire-friendly Congress. It's time for government to get serious about shared sacrifice. Taoiseach, when will you get serious about requiring not sacrifice really in view of the massive wealth they have, but a little more? A lot more, actually.
Thank you.
From these wealthy sections of our society who have been untouched by this crisis, whose system has caused this crisis in the racketeering and profiteering that went on, why will you, government, not bring in an emergency levy that would bring in billions, that would alleviate the suffering on ordinary people?
Would you adhere to the chair, please, Deputy? Would you please resume your seat? I don't know what your question is.
We create jobs. Why will you not bring in a wealth tax?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
The Minister for Finance introduced changes here in respect of the higher paid and wealthy people. There are also changes brought in respect of those who deem themselves to be exiles or tax exiles, who are a relatively small number. I've made the point about repatriation. The point was brought to me by one such person in that category who's put substantial funding back into the country here. I'm not going to comment on the detail of the survey carried out in the paper that you mentioned. That's obviously a matter for the business editor and the editors who carried out that. But I make this point to you. You know, when you do come along here and hear the Minister for Education, for instance, announce a 1.5 billion programme for the construction of over 250 new schools, which is going to provide employment and jobs and opportunities for substantial numbers of people and places for children, you don't even recognise that. And I'll say something else to you. See, you should look out beyond the shores of the country sometimes,
You're not a leader yet.
Look beyond the shores sometimes. Because the Warren Buffetts, and I could never claim to be at his level, but the Warren Buffetts of the world and the economists in business and politics internationally now look at this country as being in a very different position than it was 12 months ago, where there is confidence with deposits coming back into the banks, where there is confidence in investment in our country, where our exports in some cases are running at double-digit figures, and where the impact of government decision is in the area of the indigenous economy with small and medium enterprises, and where we have deliberately and consciously set out to protect the lower paid in this area by exemptions, by removal from this universal social charge, and by the restoration of the minimum wage, and by giving facilities and incentives to employers to take on new employees and to make it easier for them to do their business by keeping on their current employees.
That completes Leaders' questions for today.